I'm Al Hunt.
And I'm Mark Halperin. And with all due respect to Bernie Sanders, if you don't have a campaign theme song yet, may we suggest the Monster Mash?
We did the Monster Mash. We did the Monster Mash.
On the show tonight, Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz, and John Cleese. Okay, sure, John Cleese. But first, Bernie Sanders. It might be our favorite way to personally tell the world you're running for president. Walk outside your office, say you've only got a few minutes, and speak your mind. Here is Bernie being Bernie.
How does it happen that the top 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%? And my conclusion is that that type of economics is not only immoral, it's not only wrong, it is unsustainable. It can't continue. We can't continue having a nation in which we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major nation on earth at the same time as we're seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires.
Al Hunt in Washington. Bernie Sanders does talk about other issues, which we'll get to, but how potent will that core economic message be with Democrats in the caucuses and primaries?
Well, first, Mark, at the Heritage Foundation National Review, they got to be popping the champagne corks. We have heard for how many years Democrats are socialists. Now they have one, and Bernie's the real deal. I think there is a genuine appeal, populist appeal in America, anti-Wall Street, anti-big banks, anti-corporate power, anti-government. But I think there are limits to what Bernie can do. He'll get some protest votes. People don't like Hillary. But I don't think he can get cultural conservatives, and I don't think he's going to get Latinos or blacks that are a big part of Democratic primary and caucus voters.
There's no doubt that he's got limits, but I think that message has as much resonance now within the Democratic Party as it has since Bill Clinton changed the party in 1992. And his ability to say that from the heart on a consistent basis, a lot of people who won't vote for Bernie Sanders agree exactly with his critique of what's going on in the American economy. And his advantage, I think, is he says it in a full-throated way with a lot of passion.
Well, he's a politician who really means what he says. He is genuinely authentic. There's nothing phony about Bernie Sanders. And I think you're right, that has appeal. And I think he could play a real role in setting the agenda this time.
Yeah. All right, as of right now, the Democratic presidential contest is between two people, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. In a tweet today, Hillary Clinton welcomed Bernie to the race. Fun. In a reply tweet, Bernie wrote this: "Thanks, @Hillary Clinton. Looking forward to debating the big issues, income inequality, climate change, and, wait for it, getting big money out of politics. In Vermont now, we call that an elbow." At his press conference today, Sanders was asked to contrast himself with Hillary Clinton. Listen to the three topics he chose to highlight.
We don't know what Hillary's stances are on all of the issues, but this is what I can tell you. And maybe let me conclude on this. I voted against the war in Iraq. And not only did I vote against it, I helped lead the effort. And many of the things that I said back then turned out to be true. I mean, the massive destabilization in the region. I am helping right now to lead the effort against the Trans-Pacific Partnership because I believe it continues a trend of horrendous trade policies which have cost us millions of decent-paying jobs. I helped lead the effort against the Keystone Pipeline because I don't think we should be transporting some of the dirtiest fuel in the world, and we've got to be really vigorous in terms of transforming our energy system. So those are some of my views, and we'll see where Secretary Clinton comes out.
So Iraq war, Keystone Pipeline, and trade, two of the three Hillary Clinton hasn't taken clear positions yet, but Sanders highlight them. In that press conference, he took a pass on criticizing the Clintons' family foundation when asked directly about it. But earlier, in an interview with Jonathan Karl of ABC News, Sanders said, quote, "Do I have concerns about the Clinton Foundation and that money? I do." Al, how potent will these negative frames that Sanders clearly will drive going to be against Hillary Clinton?
These have great potential. She has said she was wrong on her Iraq war vote. Hillary Clinton has in 2003. But she is much more of an interventionist than her husband, or certainly Bernie Sanders. Let's not forget Libya. I think there are other issues that Sanders can raise on this. On trade, the overwhelming majority of congressional Democrats will vote against the Trans-Pacific Trade Pact. They are not ignoring the wishes of their constituency. And on big money in politics, Boy, look at the last couple of weeks. I think that's a problem for Hillary Clinton, however much she talks about campaign finance.
The foundation is a huge problem. There are more stories about that today, one in Politico about the chaos at the foundation. But I think the Iraq War one, which bedeviled her last time, is a big problem. But then you go to the issues he raised where she hasn't taken positions. On the pipeline and on trade, I think Sanders, you mentioned it before, his authenticity and his willingness to take clear stances, it will cause her to be on 1,000 very typical Hillary Clinton conference calls to say, what do we do about Bernie Sanders? That's not a place she wants to be. All right, let's go all Tim Gunn now and evaluate Bernie Sanders on his style, his posture, and, of course, his clothes. Okay, not his clothes, but at his best today, the gentleman from Vermont channeled Howard Dean, Ralph Nader, and Dennis Kucinich, saying the race shouldn't be about sniping and nastiness and whatnot, but about real issues.
I believe that in a democracy, what elections are about are serious debates over serious issues, not political gossip, not making campaigns into soap operas. This is not the Red Sox versus the Yankees. This is the debate over major issues facing the American people.
How will Bernie's style, which was quite good today, play? And can he, in fact, and should he really try to keep the media's focus away from the Clinton soap opera?
Yeah, I think he has to, because that'll happen no matter what he does. Look, Bernie doesn't do warm and fuzzy. We know that. And I think, given his message, I think the style he brings probably is an asset. And I think people are going to, we talked about it several times on this segment, Mark, he is authentic. And I think authenticity is his calling card.
We've had tons of candidates, including Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, say, you know what, I don't want this campaign to be about personality and soap opera. I want to be about the issues. I actually think he demonstrated today as good an ear as I've ever heard a presidential candidate have of shaming the press and saying, you know what, this is about real serious things. I don't want to be part of it. He says he won't run negative ads. He never has. I think he will be, after today, I think a much bigger part of this debate and setting the tone and style than I thought before today.
And there'll be no focus groups. Bernie will say what Bernie thinks.
Yeah. All right. The only real question in the end, though, concerns Bernie Sanders here is whether he's got a chance at all of winning the Democratic nomination, beating Hillary Clinton. This is what the man himself said about that today.
We're in this race to win. The question is, if you raise the issues that are on the hearts and minds of the American people, if you try to put together a movement which says we have got to stand together as a people and say that this capital, this beautiful capital, our country belonged to all of us and not the billionaire class, that's not raising an issue. That is winning elections. That's where the American people are.
Al, I know it's a long shot, but can you paint a scenario in which Bernie Sanders is the Democratic nominee for president in 2016?
No. When we chatted earlier, I told you he's got as much chance as I do of beating Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao, so he's not going to be the nominee. But that doesn't mean he can't play a significant role in agenda setting and forcing Hillary Clinton to take some positions she may not want to take. So I agree with you. Bernie can be a real force in campaign 2016, but he's not going to be the nominee.
Let's see if he can force Hillary Clinton to take positions. Let's see how much money he raises, particularly off this announcement where he's getting a lot of attention. And then finally, I'm fascinated to see when he starts as an announced candidate, spending even more time in Iowa and New Hampshire, does he start to move his poll numbers? Does Elizabeth Warren and other people recede in the minds of liberals and progressives? And do they all put down, if they're not for Clinton, that they're for Sanders?
Yeah, and don't forget, he's next door to New Hampshire, so they know him there. Pat Buchanan got 37%. I could see Bernie Sanders, particularly in a 2- or 3-way race, getting that.
And I'm looking forward to seeing if Hillary Clinton at any point, rather than catering to Sanders, stands up to him and says, Bernie, you're too far to the left. It'll be fascinating to see. All right, up next, another TED Talk. Senator Cruz of Texas is coming up, and after that, our man in the UK, John Cleese, briefs us on the British elections. We'll be right back. Our guest tonight is a Texas senator and a Republican presidential candidate. It's Ted Cruz, joining us now from Capitol Hill. Your colleague, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, another senator, announced he was going to also run for president from the other party. What's your appraisal of his candidacy, and can we hear your very good and very respectful imitation of Senator Sanders?
Well, I think I'll avoid the business of trying to do imitations of my colleagues, but I will say, I certainly welcome Bernie Sanders to the race, and I'll give him credit for candor. Bernie Sanders ran for years as a socialist. He was on the ballot in Vermont. He said, look, Democrat didn't quite describe him. He ran as a socialist. I think that's honest and straightforward, and it'll be a healthy debate for Democrats to have as just to what degree of socialism they want to embrace. You know, I think Hillary's economic policies often end up pretty close to Bernie Sanders, and it'll be interesting having her explain whether or not she agrees with Bernie Sanders with policies that he'll describe as socialist, and whether she thinks that those are good policies for this country.
All right, Senator, part of the reason we wanted to talk to you today was a speech you gave yesterday to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I know Al knows that a big part of your argument in terms of the party's appeal to Hispanic voters is simply talking about an economic agenda that you think should appeal to them. But let me ask you, it seems to me your last name is Cruz and you're from Texas. Just based on that, should you have appeal to Hispanic voters?
Well, I'll tell you, when I ran for Senate in Texas, I was very proud to receive 40% of the Hispanic vote in Texas. And that was at the same time that Mitt Romney was getting clobbered with just 27% of the Hispanic vote nationwide. And I think the reason is that my family story, my personal experience is an experience that resonates in the Hispanic community. In 1957, my dad fled Cuba. He was penniless. He couldn't speak English. He'd been in prison. He'd been tortured. He had just $100 in his underwear, and he washed dishes, making 50 cents an hour, paid his way through school, went on to start a small business. Today he's a pastor. And, you know, that experience, my dad is my hero, and his story is emblematic of all of our stories. Every one of us. Mark, you have a story like that in your background. All of us, it's who we are as Americans, and in my experience, that personal experience resonates powerfully in the Hispanic community. And the reason I'm in politics is to fight for people like my dad, teenage immigrants, washing dishes, trying to achieve the American dream. And they're the ones that are getting hurt right now under the Obama economy.
Senator, people are really interested in you and your identity. So I just want to ask you, as a historical matter, when you filled out your application to Princeton, to Harvard Law School, did you list yourself as an Hispanic?
Oh, sure. I've listed myself as Cuban American. That's my heritage and my background.
Okay. Al?
Senator, let's stay on the immigration issue for a second. If elected as president, would you repeal President Obama's 2012 executive order on Dreamers, young immigrants who came here, stayed here, and met certain conditions? Would you repeal that?
I have committed, if I'm elected president, that on the first day, I intend to rescind every illegal and unconstitutional executive action that President Obama put into place. One of the greatest negative consequences of the Obama administration has been the injury to rule of law. We've never seen a president who so routinely declines to enforce the Constitution or enforce the law. If you want to see positive improvements if you want to see positive improvements, whether it is on immigration or any other topic, the right way to do so is to change the law. You know, there was legislation.
Specifically, would that include the Dreamers?
Well, every executive action the president has taken that exceeds his constitutional authority, that disregards the law, it would be my intention to rescind. My first obligation is to defend the Constitution and defend the American people. And there is a proper way to change the law, and there's an improper way to change the law.
I assume that includes the Dreamers. Let me ask you one more question. Congressman Stephen King of Iowa has proposed narrowing the 14th Amendment so it would not give automatic citizenship to what he calls anchor babies. He says mothers come here and to have kids who become citizens. Do you support or oppose that sort of legislation?
You know, I think when it comes to immigration, the proper way to go forward is to focus on areas of common ground. And when it comes to common ground, there are a lot of areas where the American people are in agreement, in bipartisan agreement. There is overwhelming bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that we got to get serious about securing the borders, that we need to solve illegal immigration. There's overwhelming bipartisan agreement that amnesty is wrong. And there is considerable bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that we need to improve and streamline legal immigration, that we need to focus on.
Congressman King's proposal, up or down, Senator?
Look, I understand you want to talk about that, but I'm telling you what I want to talk about. If you want to pass immigration reform, you focus where there's common ground. Where I've focused is on common ground and ways to bring us together.
I want to close with talk a little bit more about your Cuban heritage and ask you in the following categories whether you have an affinity for or connection to anything part of your Cuban past. You got a favorite Cuban food, Cuban dish?
Oh, I grew up eating Cuban food all the time.
What's your
my
favorite
grandparents.
dish?
You know, picadillo. I grew up eating all the time. We had plantains. We had beans and rice. For Christmas, we would have we would roast a whole pig a lot of years for Christmas Eve. And so my grandparents, my abuelo and abuela, they didn't speak English, and my abuela was an incredible cook.
All right, favorite. You like Cuban music? Do you have a favorite Cuban singer?
You know, I have to admit, in that I'm much more of a Texan. I tend to listen to country music more than Cuban music.
All right. And finally, on the political front, Senator, what is your aspiration for the Republican presidential nominee in 2016? What percentage of the Hispanic vote, Latino vote, would you think the party could get?
Look, ideally, I think the Republican Party should be winning a majority of the Hispanic vote. We haven't historically been able to do that. But if you look at who has been hurt under the Obama economy, the Hispanic community has been hammered. It is far worse off. The rich are doing great under the Obama economy, but the most vulnerable, young people, Hispanics, African Americans, single moms, their lives have gotten harder and harder and harder. And I intend to campaign in the Hispanic community and across this country on expanding jobs and growth and opportunity for everyone to achieve the American dream. And I also intend to campaign vigorously on school choice, which I think is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, that every child, regardless of race, ethnicity, wealth, or zip code, deserves an opportunity to receive an excellent education.
All right, finally, I wanted to give you the opportunity to directly welcome your colleague, Senator Sanders, to the race, and I'd like you to do it, if you would, en español.
You know, I'm going to stick to English, but I appreciate the invitation, senor.
All right, Senator Ted Cruz, on a busy day on Capitol Hill, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. All right, and when we come back, it's the other major election we're tracking in the UK. Our Bloomberg special politics British elections correspondent, John Cleese, joins us after this. Well, the British elections are coming up, so it's time for us to give you the most insightful analysis about what's happening across the pond in the political world. To do that, of course, we're bringing in our Bloomberg Politics British elections correspondent, John Cleese. He's also here to talk about his memoir, So Anyway, which we'll get to in a moment. He joins us now live from Britain. John, are you able to hear us across the Atlantic?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, good. All right, so voters in the four nations of the United Kingdom are going to vote for a new government on May 7th. How can it possibly be that there are four nations within one country?
Well, England and Scotland became joined together in 1707. And then in 1800, they were joined by Ireland. And then in 1922, we lost the Southern Ireland representatives and had only the representatives of Northern Ireland. So the United Kingdom actually consists of Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland.
John, the current Prime Minister is David Cameron. He's the leader of the Tory party.
Yes.
What's that guy like?
He's an old Etonian, which means he's a bit toffee-nosed and he doesn't really understand anyone who hasn't, been left a lot of money. I don't think he's a bad chap at all, but I don't basically like the Tory party, and I think that these people are not really ideally suited to dealing with the problem that most people feel the pinch financially in our country, except for the top 1%.
All right, John, there's this other chap named Miliband, Ed Miliband, leader of the Labour Party. Does he actually have a chance to be the next Prime Minister?
I think he does. I saw him on television on Sunday. It was the first time I'd ever seen him because I'm not the slightest bit interested in politics. And I thought he actually performed quite well. I think he's got two or three complete loonies in his shadow cabinet, people like Ed Balls, who I just think should be taken away and shot.
Is that a Dickensian name?
No, I don't know where he got it from. It's extraordinarily appropriate. And I think he should be taken away and shot. along with a couple of others, because I think the Labour government, when they were last in under Gordon Brown, were pretty terrible for the last 3 or 4 years. And most of my friends literally have no idea who they're going to vote for. They cannot they're trying to think of the least worst. And I think probably, in my case, I'm going to vote for the Liberal Democrats, because I think we need someone in the coalition who's not looking after Scottish interests.
All right, I want to ask you about another chap, a fellow named Nick Clegg. Basically, he's kind of like your version of Joe Biden. Is that right?
He's actually, he's very young. He's only 17. And he's done terribly well as Deputy Prime Minister. I think he's very likable, and I think he's actually a very smart guy, and that's the party that I support. So I would think that, wouldn't I? But I'm actually going to go on the bus with him on Wednesday, the day before the general election, just to say to people, I think this is the one.
What's the difference, just thumbnail, between Scots, Irish, and people from Wales?
Oh. Scots and Irish, large, ginger, hairy, and from Wales, short, dark, and bow-legged.
Pretty simple.
Very easy to spot.
But what about in terms of their temperaments?
Their temperaments, they're all Celts, meaning they're not proper Englishmen, and they're excitable. Terry Jones,
John,
Monty Python, is a typical Celt.
John, that raises another interesting question, and a more profound and existential one. What exactly is Wales?
Whales are large mammals that swim around in the North Atlantic. What is your question? I don't understand. What is Wales?
That pretty much
yeah,
is
so
it.
many Americans I think are confused about what Wales actually is.
Oh, Wales is a sort of western bit next to England, and it's always been treated as part of England since Edward I basically went there and told them that they belong to us.
All right, and John, finally, before we sign off and let you go back to some, I don't know, fish and chips or whatever, what's at stake in this election for the British people?
Very little, I think. I don't think it matters. The place is a complete mess, and I don't think it matters who gets elected, really.
No. All right, on that optimistic note, we wish to thank John Cleese, our special British political correspondent. John, stay safe out there on the campaign trail. You can check out his book, So Anyway, at finer bookshops near you, and we'll be right back after this. So on this episode, we talked about Bernie Sanders and the UK elections. Well, guess what? A strange confluence. Bernie's brother Larry is running for the parliament in the UK as a member, surprise, of the Green Party. This was Bernie's message today to his sib.
I hope my brother does very well in his race for parliament in the UK.
That's nice. All right, heads up, Larry. Our man John Cleese is doing a big investigative piece on you. You're warned. Until tomorrow, for Al and for myself, we say to you, sayonara.